My name is Sylvester Lewis, and I'm a descendant of one of the founders of Grace Creek Baptist Church, a man by the name of Joseph Free Joe Harris. I'm also a native of the Eads community. I've worshipped at Grace Creek Baptist Church. Many of my ancestors worshipped here. The church was founded by two free men of color. They were both preachers. One was Joseph Harris, the other was Simon Price. And most records show that Simon Price was the elder of the two, and he was also the first pastor of this church. According to an old gravestone that can be found just a few yards from here, Simon Price was the first pastor of this church. I remember the incident. I was 9 years old at the time. I wasn't there, but the word spread like wildfire soon after it happened, and everyone was wondering what happened to the body. Where was it? About 4 days later, they found the body in the river, Hatchie River, north of Arlington. But they had the funeral here. I was here at the funeral. It was well attended. I mean, the people came from out from Memphis. Some came from Fayette County. A few came from Haywood County. I imagine some of them came as because they had already heard so much about the brutality of this murder, and I guess they wanted to know more about what happened, why it happened, and some of them were curiosity seekers. Some were actually relatives, and some were just people who had formerly lived in the community. So the funeral was held on a work day during the week, but it was an overflow crowd. It was probably one of the biggest attendance up until that time that I'd seen here for a funeral. But Jesse was a young man, recently married, had one child, and I understand there's some incident that took place at the Wilson store in Arlington. Now, just what that was all about, I wouldn't be able to know, but I heard something about a dispute about a receipt, and I also heard that there was a woman involved or something, and I think that explains the brutality of the murder, because I understand his body was badly mutilated and was dragged behind a car to the river. The church was founded, as Reverend Tucker has just stated, in 1843, and the founders of the church came here from Virginia. Joseph Harris got his freedom in Virginia in 1832. He was 37 years old at the time. And the reason he came here is because his wife and children were enslaved. Their slave owner was a man named Samuel Leake. So Samuel Leake brought his slaves and family to Shelby County, and Joseph Free Joe Harris came along to be with his family. And I think the same thing was applied to Simon Price. His wife, Kitty, was a slave owned by Fendall Thurman. And the census shows that he was living with the Thurmans. And I couldn't quite figure that out. I said, why would a free colored man be living with a white family named Thurmans? But I found out that was why. His wife, Kitty, was a slave owned by the Thurmans. But Joseph Harris and Simon Price, along with many slaves, were founders of this church. We don't want to leave that out. You know, There would have been no reason for the church except for the slaves. The slaves have played a key role in the founding of this church, and some of the families who were under slavery at the time around here, Grays, Branches, Lewises, Tuckers, Harrises, Andersons. These are some of the families who were under slavery. Donaldsons. The list goes on and on. So after slavery ended, then so many of these families branched out and started marrying and moving into other communities. But this church, Grays Creek Church, was the first African American church in all of Shelby County. And two of Free Joe's grandsons were instrumental in helping other churches and other communities to get organized. So, but so much of it started right here, and they came here most of them came from Virginia. Now some of the Grays, I understand, came from North Carolina. But one of the earliest white families to settle in this area was Royster. This cemetery was originally the Royster burial ground. The Royster owned a large tract of land that went all the way from where we are right now all the way up to Fayette County, east of here. He had a total of close to 1,800 acres of land. And he was also a slave owner. The Grays, brothers James and John Gray, the records show they came from Kentucky. And their homestead was just about 3 miles west of here, around the Cobb Road and what is now Highway 64. Back then, Highway 64 was Stage Road. And I'm trying to think of, the Leaks family. They were brothers, Richard and Samuel Leak, and they both owned slaves. That's why there were several families of Leaks that lived in this area, and they African American Leak families who were not related. And people wonder how could they be born, raised in the same community and not be related like this. But that's because each slave owner had slaves, and each slave owner's slaves were not related to each other.